Hello, everybody. This is Byron. I'm back for the Zoomcast number 6. So we're coming along with Zoomcasts, and this one's a little different because I didn't pre-announce it to you. I thought you were going to be all busy, hopefully with your families and kids and occupied, but you may take time to watch this over the Christmas holiday. And today I'm really happy and really pleased to be with my old friend Donna D'Ingillo. And a lot of you remember that I've introduced you to Donna's work over the months. She's had a new book this period of time, actually last year around this time, called Divine Father, Divine Mother. And Donna is the founder and president of the Center for Christ Consciousness. And she has been engaged in a profound ministry for a long time through the center. And then previous to that was a Urantia Book student with great commitment way back. And she's one of the veterans like me that go back to the 70s. And so Donna's seen a lot of things come and go in the Urantia movement. And, coming back up to the present, she's become a mature minister, teacher, healer, and has done actually a lot of major healings on me personally, including, I'll share just one. I once had a serious whiplash from a automobile accident, and I had a major healing of the whiplash from Donna's work, and it was at a distance even, so it was that's why I already was a believer in Donna. Then I became a believer in her healing work, which is, I recommend to any of you. She does healings work, but it's in the broadest sense, a healing ministry, one-on-one, through the phone, people all over the country. And she teaches, she writes. She's got another book also called Teach Us to Love, which is quite an excellent introductory book on the Urantia revelation and some interpretation of particularly what is the spiritual teaching of the Urantia revelation. So I recommend that book, Teach Us to Love, and of course, Divine Mother, Divine Father, which came out recently, and I'm sure there'll be much more coming from Donna. So Donna, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Byron. I'm so glad to be here, and I look forward to our conversation.
You're looking lovely today with the Christmas tree there and big smile. So thank you for coming on. And before we get going, I'm going to invite everybody for a brief prayer. So let's pray today and commune today to and with the Spirit of Christ, who we celebrate, especially this season. And I want to invite everybody to just go as far deep down as you can to contact the Spirit of Jesus, who was born, according to our calendar, on Monday. And see if you can feel the presence of Christ energy, Christ consciousness. Just feel it and feel the presence. And if it isn't so clearly present, feel your relationship with the Christmas celebration itself, even in the past, and what that was. And maybe if you have a few memories of the joy of Christmas, to bring that forward. Let's just take a moment and do that. And I'll just add, while we're dwelling with this, that the Urantia revelation teaches us that Christ is present as the Spirit of truth. It's the Spirit that helps us discern the truth. And try to turn on that Spirit today. in yourself while we talk about the source of truth in our local universe, particularly his birth on our planet. All right, everybody, thank you so much. And I'm going to open up here with a little, my own personal experience with Jesus, with Christ, with the spirit of Christmas, and how I grew up a little bit. And Donna, we're going to talk to Donna about her life too, and how she grew up with Christianity, with Christmas, and then get a little bit into what is the contrasting nature of the Urantia revelation in our lives once we get into this, how it augments, what does it add to our celebration of Christmas? What depth comes to us, or what joy comes to us? It may be different, or maybe it's the same, but it's just a little bit increased. And that's the case with me. And I grew up with Orthodox Christianity, but it was Greek Orthodox, which is a little bit more mystical than any of the other churches, or some people say that, because that's their emphasis is more on the mystical apprehension rather than on a belief system. Although they have a heavy belief system, they also have a system of what do we feel, how do we feel into this? And that's in the liturgy itself, which is an evocation of all five senses in this liturgy. It's sense of smell with incense, and then this tremendous pageantry that they have in the liturgy. And they don't speak the liturgy, they sing the liturgy. The whole thing is sung. They sing it, and they don't do it in English, they do it in Greek. So it's kind of poetic. And so I had all this sensory input and these huge icons. I mean, this icon of Mother of Mary behind the altar is like 50 feet high, tile fresco. So I had all this sensory input that put me in more of a mystical sense. But when we grew up, we just had a vague idea that, because all you have is the Bible, and the Bible just has a couple of sentences really about the nativity of Christ. And it's I think highly profound and poetic in the Bible. Gospel of John, even the Gospel of John isn't even about the nativity. The Gospel of John is Jesus as an adult, but you have Mark, Matthew, and Luke, which have the scenes, or pretty much the same scene, and the scenes are glorious, they're wonderful. They have brought forward a tremendous culture of Christmas that I would say was something really profound for children up until the 60s or 70s. And I noticed that it became increasingly commercialized and secularized as we were growing up. But in the 50s, go back to, if you're that old, then you think about what it was like in the 50s, it was not like that. I mean, there were gifts and presents, but I just remember things just really lit up and not burdened by running out, to a shopping mall. We didn't have shopping malls in the 50s, really. And so now, and commercials blasting you, and it's so that spirit has been covered over, for all of us. So that's why I was so grateful to have the Urantia revelation to bring it back at a new level, to augment the idea. And what was startling about the Urantia revelation was different from the New Age, because the New Age was, a lot of it was like, well, Jesus was a great guy. He was really a good teacher, but he was not an incarnation. He's like Buddha, he's like another Buddha, but he's like Buddha in the West. And so but he was not an incarnation, because that's a dogma, that's a doctrine, and these doctrines are oppressing us. We got to get rid of the doctrines. So we have to get rid of the church ritual and all this stuff, which is a relic of the past. And this is now we have new rituals. We have the New Age, and we have new we have Buddhist rituals and Hindu rituals, and we do yoga, and we do everything but celebrate the nativity of an incarnate Son of God. We don't like that idea because it's associated with a oppressive church hierarchy. So how can we rescue it from this oppressive church hierarchy, which it was in a lot of ways? It wasn't for me personally, but when I grew up, I realized that most of my friends were like in major rebellion, against it, particularly the Catholics. And I was not, but I recognize the whole culture was in what I call the ABJ rebellion, which stands for anything but Jesus, and particularly here in California. And all my friends, just everybody I know here, I don't know any Christians here, basically. I mean, one, I actually know one Christian. But everybody here is New Age, and we're all Buddhists. And so there's not a celebration of Christ. However, I will add, or I would supplement that by saying, we had a big Christmas sing-along here at our house. And I live in this big house with a lot of people. And all these friends of mine came who were like New Agers, in the best sense. And it was all joyous and it was Christmas songs and they were singing. So they entered into the spirit of it, but they don't believe it. They don't believe the doctrine. So today we want to rehabilitate that a little bit. And I'm going to say just a few more things and then Dawn and I will dialogue. I wanted to just remind you folks that the Urantia Book adds correction to the story by telling us that Jesus was not born of a virgin. The virgin birth is a mythic notion. I think it's a beautiful idea, actually, but it's mythic. And that actually Joseph was the father, but that by the miraculous, mysterious incarnation process, a personality who is a real divine person can come into the zygote, actually, or into this child, into this embryo, and that personality gets installed into the biological entity of the embryo, however you want to conceive of when it comes, but we're told it comes by this process that no one in the universe understands except those who have been through it. And those who have been through it are, we're told, the creator's sons, as the Urantia Book calls them, the creator's sons, of which there isn't just one, but that there were 700,000 of them. So the 700,000 Christs, and this is one way the Urantia Book keeps things weird, because to think that there are 700,000 Christs, it sounds bizarre, but it's a very big universe, much, 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 much bigger than the medieval universe that we grew up with in the Bible. It's not even medieval, it's pre-medieval, it's ancient. And there was no way they could understand this, and it's even tough for us to understand that there are trillions of inhabited planets, and that you can't have the setup that you have in biblical theology, where that Jesus is the Son of God, right? He's a Son of God. But I always thought, well, why is Jesus the Son of God? The only Son of God. Why are they telling us? I mean, am I not a son of God? Why is he? So it was always really vague for everybody. At least it was for me, and I was oriented to figure this out. But now we understand that the sonship that we participate in is it's the shepherd for us is Christ and the mother. And Donna in particular, we're going to get into how Donna is bringing forward the mother spirit, nature, and aspect of the Creator Son, actually is a consort of Christ. But the point being that Christ is expanded for us in the Urantia revelation and made in a way factual in new ways. In particular, we learned that part of his achievement of sovereignty in the local universe of over 6 million inhabited planets is that he has to incarnate 7 times in his universe. Not always as a human, but as higher level, higher beings, so that he can see the point of view of his creatures. So he incarnates as a Melchizedek. He incarnates as a seraphim. He incarnates as an ascendant human in the afterlife. In other words, he's incarnating into the afterlife of a human. And he does that in 2 different levels. One is the what we call the Miraja level, and others at an even higher level. So he's experiencing what it's like to be one of his children. And so his final incarnation is the one on Urantia, which becomes unbelievably important because he's the creator of all these worlds, and he chose our world. And he chose our world to incarnate on. So it's much more profound, actually, than even in the Bible. He came here when he could have come to any other planet, but why did he come here? So we're going to talk about that too. In fact, I'll open by asking you, Donna, why did Jesus, who we call Christ Michael in the Urantia Book, also, why did he come to our planet in particular rather than some other planet?
Wow, that's a really good question to start off with. And it really requires a little bit of going back into our ancient history with what happened here on this planet during our more primitive times. And one of the things that was so striking to me about reading the Urantia book for the first time when I was so young was that it really made sense to my mind why there was so much war and greed and disease and poverty that nothing I had ever been exposed to before explained. And that event is called the Lucifer Rebellion, and then how our planet participated in straying against the divine plan of evolution that both Christ Michael and Mother Spirit create for their evolutionary material worlds. This event participated a very disastrous, calamitous effects on our planet, and we are in the early phases of outworking. But from my experience, and I did have an experience with Michael a number of years ago when he was showing me this world and all of its problems, and I was kind of like on a cliff with him looking down at this world, and all I felt was his compassion. And our world has suffered such a deviation of the divine plans, the miscarriage of justice and fairness has been so thwarted here that I believe he chose us out of the compassion of his heart for our plight to show us what the nature of God truly is in human form, because that is our destiny, to evolve that God nature within each one of us. And we didn't have appropriate help and guides in physical form. We would have had not only a civilization that was following the divine plan of evolution, but we would have had a representative, a human representative of the higher governmental authorities, the celestial government or the universe government, and that would have been our biological uplifters, Adam and Eve. And unfortunately, their plan to uplift the planet biologically and socially was also thwarted because of the rebels that were trying to create havoc and keep us diverted from the divine plan. So Michael, I believe he chose here to show us the nature, the loving nature of God, of deity, the approachability of deity, and the compassion and mercy that he has. And I like to think of Jesus as this big love magnet when he was on the planet. Now, of course, he did draw a lot of flack from the ecclesiastical authorities, but the common people loved him because he was that radiance of love and understanding and compassion. And I believe that that's what he's calling us forth to do through our spirits of truth, is to make contact with that God presence within and to develop it whatever way we feel we're being guided, so that we can be that light and radiance out into the world and help this planet get back on track.
Beautifully well said, Donna. Thank you. What really stands out for me is the fact that his incarnation here is super compassionate, because you're not only coming in to correct the situation, but you're exposing yourself to danger out of love, and we look at, Christian saints who walk into places that are dangerous, like leper colonies, to heal them. And they're following Jesus. Jesus incarnates into a place, ends up getting killed, but it does it out of love. And I think that's the thing that's why, when we had our Christmas sing-along here at the house with my New Age friends, they're feeling that presence of that. It's a field effect that comes in through a portal, you might say, just by singing a song that's been sung millions of times, you're entering into that spirit. And I could just see everybody all lit up. And I thought it was ironic, in a way. But it's not so much about who it was, what it is, and, what are the facts, but it's about the feeling the love, feeling its presence all the time. But it does, do you think that there's an augmentation of the presence in these holidays?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
They turn it up.
Well, in the Christian world, people are thinking about Jesus. They're going to church services, they're worshiping. There's that period of Advent in the Christian church where there's that 4 weeks leading to Christmas, that the focus is on Jesus and the birth and the meaning of his life. And that is a human level of consciousness. So the divine level of consciousness is always seeking, where are there openings? Where are there openings for truth? And so they come in, and there are angels who are infusing the presence of our Mother Spirit, who is this container of love and safety and compassion. She's our mindful environment. And these angels are amplifying that which is true and real of Jesus' life and his meaning, to open our hearts so that we can have that experience with Jesus, that intimacy with Jesus that he wants to have with each one of his children. That's why he gave us the Spirit of truth. Now, people may be blocked in their receptivity channels of their mind because of belief systems or their ideas about a vengeful, wrathful God that close that door. But during this time, the door is open a little bit wider, so that spiritual presence is getting in there to kind of warm everyone's hearts and have them experience that love. I'd like to share a little bit of my own Christian church experience with you. Is before I got the Urantia book, I was raised in a very staid Lutheran church. And I remember that, well, I had to go to church. My parents went to church. I had to go to church. And even though I didn't necessarily always understand the dogma, I loved singing the hymns. And I remember in this very traditional Lutheran church where everybody was standing upright, I would be so moved by these hymns that I would be crying, and I'm so embarrassed because here I've got these tears running down my face because I'm feeling the presence of Jesus and God in me, and I didn't know what was happening. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, no one else is crying. I'm a big crybaby. So when we would have Christmas services, the candlelight service, Christmas Eve, and we're singing Silent Night and all those other hymns, I would just be a puddle. I mean, really, I would just be weeping so profusely because my heart was so open because I was feeling the presence. And now I don't go to the church anymore. I do my own worship in my personal meditative time, communion with Jesus, with Michael, with Mother, with my spirit. And it's there. It's right there. That presence is right there. And I still feel that same wave of love and compassion and emotion. And it's just so wonderful how, when we really open up to spirit, that love is right there to meet us and expand us in that exquisite bond that we have, that people can have for themselves if they take the time to start developing on their own. And that's the beauty of this time, that I think the potential for that experience is definitely heightened right now.
You know, I didn't actually know that you had that experience as a child. So it's good to know that.
Yeah.
That's very sweet. And no wonder you're doing what you're doing today, because you were already in that in that spirit as a child. It was natural for you.
It was. I didn't know it at the time, but when I started to read the life and teachings of Jesus, especially the part of his birth and infancy, it did dash a little bit of my Christmas mythology about the fact that the shepherds really didn't hear the angels sing, and that Jesus wasn't the child of a virgin. But then, but because I read parts 1 through 3 first, it really resonated with me, and I said, this has to be true, because it made a lot of sense. And some of the other traditions that I had been raised in, going through 2 years of catechism to be confirmed in the Lutheran Church, were dead to me, but reading his life made his life come alive to me, and I fell in love with him in a way that I had never experienced in the Christian church. Reading the Urantia book was so viscerally stimulating to me in my relationship with him that I wanted to develop myself according to the way he developed his humanity, where to the point he reached that Christed state. And I want that. I said, I want that.
Well, you got it, or you're getting it.
I'm getting it. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I developed the Center for Christ Consciousness, because I really saw the need that people were struggling in their understanding of what the nature of who and what God is. And I knew that the reading the book was so helpful, and then developing this personal intimacy in my own experiential life, that's the ticket. That's how we do it. And I think that's what Jesus was here to show us, and that birth experience was just part of a long continuum of the majesty of divinity coming down to earth to show us the way. And it's a beautiful thing that he did for us. Beautiful thing.
That's a great phrase, Majesty of Divinity. Beautiful. Thank you. I love that. Poetic. It sort of rhymes almost. Didn't they being your intuition circle back and asked you to engage with the Lutheran Church at a certain point a couple of years ago? You want to share that story with us, and what happened with that?
Well, I did feel some leadings to go back into the church, and I found a church in a local community, and I started attending, and I went to a few services, and it just didn't really do anything for me. And I'm not a real gregarious, outgoing person. I kind of stay back when I'm in a new social situation. So I just kind of wanted to go and feel the attitude of the church. And no one approached me after the service to say, hi, you new here, we haven't seen you before. So I just thought, But then right around Easter, a few years later, I went back, because I kind of felt my angels prompting me to go back into the church. And that service, they had a little announcement in the bulletin that they were starting a healing service. And so healing is my modus operandi, so to speak. So I went and called the woman who was leading the healing ministry, and I said, can anyone join, or do you have to be a member? And she encouraged me to join, even though I wasn't a member. So I started going to services. And this is a Christian healing order called the Order of St. Luke, which is a worldwide organization with chapters in many branches of Christianity, pretty much all of them. And they were studying a curriculum looking at Jesus' healing miracles and trying to study what the impact was. And after reading, studying the Urantia book and Jesus' miracles and what the revelators say about what he did, and then hearing where these Lutherans were coming from, I could see that there was this huge schism in understanding. And I knew that I could help them in some way. So as time went on, and I did mention to them at the onset, and with the pastors and with her, the leader, that I had my own healing prayer ministry. But they never asked me one question about it. Neither the pastors nor the leader did. So it's fine. So I was there for a few years, and then we started doing healing services, and they asked me to facilitate some of them and lead prayer or worship. You know, they really saw that I had some skills and some gifts. And I was even asked to speak at a weekend, a discovery weekend. It's designed to help people get closer to God and Jesus. And they asked me to talk about my experiences. But then I was counseling a woman member of the group whose daughter was going through a hard time. And I had mentioned something about the healing work that I do. And I had developed a Jesus My Healer website, which was completely independent of my Center for Christ Consciousness website, because I knew that if Christians saw what I was really doing, they wouldn't understand it. But basically what happened was the woman Googled me, saw my Center for Christ Consciousness, red flags went up. She told the leader of the group, who went to the pastor. And the short of it is that the woman was the leader was very freaked out in fear. And she didn't want me to be a member of the ministry anymore, even though she said she loved me, but she was highly judgmental and fear-based. And I met with the pastors, and they basically wanted me to toe the line, the theological line of what they were believing, even though they would talk about in their services, we have to stretch out of our comfort zone. We have to open ourselves up to new meanings and new revelations. And it was like their hypocrisy was staring them in their face. And I knew then that this was not a place for me. If they were not even willing, the ministers were not even willing to stand up for me to this woman, the leader of the group, and say, well, she may not believe exactly like you do, but she's done a lot of good for the group, and people are seeing that she has gifts. You have to get over this. But no, they sided with her, and they asked me to leave the ministry. They asked me to step down from my positions of leading. I was part of the worship team in the services where I get to read the gospel. They asked me to step down. Oh, you can still be a member, Donna, and give us money, but you can't be a leader, or you can't participate as a leader. So I basically said, see ya. And I left. And I just can't deal with that kind of energy that's so fear-based and hypocritical. So it was very disappointing to me, very disappointing.
But it was as I say, you know, often, you know, it's a soul evolving experience, you know, because you really.
It was.
You did it. I'm glad that you went there, and you get this story to tell us. It helps us to recognize, you know, on the one hand, you know, they are stuck in their little groove or their box, not groove, but box. On the other hand, they hold a place, or placeholders for conventional minded people to
Yes.
at least get some access. And so I'm okay with it. And I didn't used to be, but now I'm like, yeah, you know, when you particularly when you travel around the Midwest and you see that people are improved by their church participation versus those who are not, you know, and when I lived in Oklahoma City for a while, I noticed that either, you know, everybody was either a real Christian or they were an alcoholic. It's like hardly,
Wow.
you know, it's like
Wow.
really interesting. And because they don't have cultural options, like, you know, you live in Florida, I live in California, you know, maybe Alec, our friend, who's our technical director right now, could tell us what it's like being in Georgia, you know, going through this. But I've come to, I want to share this, that I've come to appreciate Christians more, because remember that they are fighting a secular world out there, you know, not so much fighting it, but they're a critique of it. And so they are stretching themselves by maintaining something in the face of commercialization, secularization. Everybody's, you know, giving up on our tradition. So, and a lot of them empty out into places like California and Florida, and they're doing New Age stuff. So we're losing access to the tradition. The church I grew up in, as I mentioned, Greek Orthodox, they're bankrupt. Financially, the diocese, the archdiocese, they're so out of money that the bank said, we're kicking you out. We're not going to let you have an account. You know,
Wow.
archdiocese in New York City. and the Chase Manhattan Bank said, bye-bye, we're not going to bank for you because your checks are bouncing. And
Wow.
that's unprecedented, and it shows you that they are embattled. And so I pray for them, and I think that in time they will soften. And we just have to have faith that they will, and that, because they'll be looking, they'll come to us, maybe.
Well, I think something major is outworking here. And I loved those last two papers in the Urantia book where they talk about the problems of modern Christianity and what we're going through, and then this revival of a new type of thinking that hasn't fully been totally integrated into our waking consciousness. We're still in that polarization phase, which may continue for a few more years. But there's enough of Jesus, the true meaning of Jesus in Christianity, to form that little nucleus for the bigger revelations of truth. And I'm not worried so much about the church, because I know that Jesus wants to have that direct experience with each one of his children. And that the spiritual pressure on the planet that's being orchestrated by our Mother Spirit and the angels, that those angels are applying this spiritual, well, a lot of people call it pressure, a spiritual energy to awaken our hearts so that Jesus can speak to them and people can have a direct personal experience. Oh, that's who you are. Oh, I thought about you this way, but he is the truth. He is the embodiment of truth. And when you have that direct personal experience with him, it is unmistakable, and it changes a person forever. And I think that that's where we're headed, that the spiritual influx is coming into our consciousness, and it's working in those areas where we're confused and fearful and anxious. And it's saying there's a better way, there's another way. And then Jesus is ready to meet us right there when we're ready to open up to it. And I think that's what we're in the midst of happening right now.
They are doing a spiritual workaround. They can pour energy through churches, and they do, but they don't just do that. They're working around them. Example is Doreen Virtue. You may know Donna, her work, New Age kind of.
With the angels and that.
Angel contact. I don't know if you know that she had Jesus come to her like in an apparition, and she's changed everything. And she's announced this to her, just probably disturbing to some of her followers, that I'm now a follower of Christ. He came to me and he's teaching me, and I want you to open to Christ, what she was not doing before. She was an eclectic New Age teacher, prophet. And so he comes direct, and that's what must happen for salvation of the planet right now. They see it clearly, and that's why this is a revelatory time. That's why there's the Urantia book, but it's not the only revelation. There's the Course in Miracles, and there's other teachings from Christ. And we now have the rise of the Divine Mother consciousness. I'll give you an example. I don't think you know Marguerite Rigoglioso here, who I think you've met here, who's pretty New Age, a very brilliant teacher, but has been led, I'm watching her over the years, led into Mother Spirit consciousness. And it's kind of in spite of her training. And so they recently put on a solstice event here. There was a huge event, and it was an event for Mother consciousness. That reminded me of working with you. It was 100 people, and they evoked the presence of Mother, and I felt that it was self-transcending for this woman, this convener, that was beyond her mind, beyond her belief system, and so they had worked around her own beliefs, and they orchestrated this highly successful event of Mother worship, Mother connection, that has changed me, actually. It was like being at like a church that no one had ever thought of before. It was a church for the Mother worship of the consort, what we would call the consort of Christ.
It's interesting that you would say that, because that's something that's been coming to me recently, and I actually even saw it in one of my client calls with a woman I'm working with, and it was like to develop a church of the mother. And it was like, oh, wow, are we ready for that now? And I think so, because a lot of women who have kind of walked away from the Christian patriarchy and are still very spiritual and have found mother, and they need a different venue to come into their fullness of their spirituality, so they can approach Jesus without the trappings that have pushed so many people away from the church. So that I think this is a big phenomenon that's happening. And one of the things that I feel like mother has been kind of speaking to me is to now go and do more public outreach in my locale, which I haven't really done too much since being down here. My ministry has been more through the internet and people finding me that way, but to speak more about the presence of the divine feminine and understanding the divine feminine. What is it? Where does it come from? What's its purpose? And I think that that would be a little bit more attractive to people, because when I say I am the founder of the Center for Christ Consciousness, that word Christ, boom, it immediately brings up, oh, that's Jesus, that's Christian, and they don't want anything to do with that. And I have encountered that time and again. I'm not changing the name of my ministry. Jesus gave it to me, or Michael gave it to me. I'm not changing it, but I have to take a different approach with some people, because this Christ word, Jesus word, is so loaded with fear and suspicion. And it's unfortunate, but this is part of the correction that we're going through, and to bring people back to who he is in the purity of his glorious being, without the trappings of the dogma. And when people have that experience with him, that dogma no longer matters. It's because I know him. He is in me. He is with me. And that experience will expand, especially if people make more contact with mother, because she's the one that's growing us in spirit. She's the expander. She's the breath of life that's always replenishing us with spiritual energy, so we can expand in Christ and in our own Christed nature and grow in that.
You know, it's funny that, think that the doctrine, the people are kind of like in a revolution against doctrine and dogma. And it's ironic to me that a lot of the doctrine is actually correct according to the Urantia Book, a lot of it. The Trinity, which is a kind of an outlandish notion, given monotheism and polytheism and, what do you mean that's true? But they got that kind of right. And they also got the Incarnation as an incarnation of the divine creator being. I mean, they got that right. I mean, that was a big deal to do that. So in a funny way, in an ironic way, it's worth honoring that they got that down well, but they added on top of it mythic notions, the atonement doctrine, the virgin birth, and a few other things like that. So there is a winnowing away of doctrine. So what will be left behind is, a corrected, purified doctrine for those who care for that. And I think that we all need some of it, because, you need to ground the feeling in factual matters somewhat. That, yes, there was this incarnation. Yes, it is not a human being. It is not what Deepak Chopra tells us, that he was just a really nice guy and a good teacher. This is our creator. We need to know him as our creator father. And we are now learning that there is a divine consort, Mother Spirit. I want to ask you to say more about your experience of the parentship. I don't know if that's right. The divine parents, and how more about how you've been bringing Mother forward into our awareness.
Well, I have to say, this has been probably the biggest joy of my life, to develop my own personal relationship with them. And the development of that relationship was gradual. But what they were basically here to show me is that we will parent you the way that you really need, the way you did not get from your human parents because of their own limitations, their lack of understanding, their lack of timing, you know, and they took me on this journey of being reparented. And I would spend time in meditation where I would bring up my experiences, and they would show me what my mother was going through or what my father was going through. And so I just started to open up myself to who they were, what they were trying to show me, how they were helping me really experience that profound level of love that I had always craved deep in my soul. And no one could ever fill that for me. And, you know, I looked to husband and other relationships, but it wasn't really until I opened up to our parents and my own spirit that I really began to feel that I am lovable and I am love. And it was so profound to me, and this is even before I started the Center for Christ Consciousness, that I knew that this was a life-changing experience for me, and I wanted to help other people, because I basically see that most people are walking around suffering greatly from a feeling of unworthiness. That what the planetary rebellion did was to create this kind of schism in our emotional nature so that we don't feel that profound love of our Creator within us. And basically, over time, as I developed my relationship with them, they started to take me on this journey into the past, where they started to show me how the rebellion influenced the development of human spirituality. And I started to go deeper into my own generational past and encountered many, many very horrible energies of war and brutality that they helped me outwork, and to forgive, and to see through a lens of compassion and a bigger perspective of what my energy system, what my own being was carrying. And so it was around the early 2000s that I started feeling more of their messages coming through. And I started to host some groups when I lived in California, in Marin, to transmit their messages of love. And Byron, you attended some of them, and it was a wonderful time in my life to just hold that space for them to come through and give their children not only the love they need, but a new context for the love, to be able to feel that love. And I remember the first night when we inaugurated the Center for Christ Consciousness, and Michael was coming through and just giving people that personal love. And I remember the tears of joy that we were all experiencing because the presence was so powerful. And it continues to grow. And my relationship with my parents has superseded the influence of my own human parents, so that when the time came for them to graduate and to leave the planet in their physical bodies, I was happy. I did not suffer one whit of pain, of separation, or loss of them. I was so happy for them because they were going on their new life adventure. And my mom and dad are Michael and Mother's Spirit. They're my mommy and my daddy. And I go to them whenever I have a problem, and they help me with every human problem I have. And then sometimes I go to Jesus as a human and say, Father, okay, you experience this as a human. Show me how I can help, how I need to move through this experience with your guidance and your help. And I cannot tell you the gains I've made from my experience with them. I would not be where I am right now in my own understanding of who I am and my life path had I not opened this door to opening that relationship with them. And I can only encourage other people to put down the books about how to do it and just experience them. Just let yourself be held in their loving embrace and let them be a mommy and daddy to you, because we're all still big babies. And we just are too damn arrogant or, independent to admit it. But if we humble ourselves to that degree of being a child of faith, they will respond, and they will fill you with more love, that the heart will open, the tears will flow, and you'll feel like you came home, that you've come home.
Wow, beautifully well said. And that's a testimonial. Thank you for the testimonial, Sharon.
I'm a little misty right now.
Well, I'm glad to see the feelings. You know, when we feel tears of gratitude, you know, there's more blessing. This, you know, and so, you know, let's carry on with that. I wanted to share also. I mean, when I was in the presence of these sessions that we had with you when you lived out here, and I always, you know, I started out with, they don't have time for me. Why would they make time for me? You know, they're busy. You know, they you know, that's impossible. And you know, this is an exceptional case. Okay, it's an exceptional case. They're gonna have, but you know, then you slowly get weaned off of this thing that they don't really, you know, care about you that much. No, they're infinite. Their consciousness is unlimited. They're outside of space and time. They can come into space and time and minister to you, and they're not running out of time to do that. They don't have to like go off and do, you know. So when you know, it's hard to get that because it's sort of like it's like cosmological physics or something. Where do they get the time? They have the time. They have time for you. They have. And what the other thing that I'm grateful to you, Donna, is that you have made it. You've gotten us to transition from the Christ relationship as well. It's a beautiful one-on-one relationship to a parent relationship. It's our parents, our local universe parents, and we don't get that so much from the Urantia book per se. You know, I mean, it's certainly there, but you've brought forward. This is a parent-child relationship where there are two parents, not just one parent. So it's not like this single parent, Jesus. You know, it's like a single parent, and you're this orphan that's adopted or something. It's actually your creator parents, and that's the way it ought to be because the whole universe is based on parent-child. You know, and what the kind of the New Age does is it raises up the human ego and brings down the majesty of deity and makes us like equal to them. Oh, well, they're good teachings, you know, but there's not a worshipful relationship because it's not for them, not a deity. And, but sometimes they flip into that anyway because it's present anyway. But it's helpful to know these are creators. They're deities. They are God to the local universe, you know, and they have all the prerogatives, and particularly because Michael, as we say in the Urantia book, we call him Michael incarnated here to become worthy of this state of freedom called sovereignty. He's the sovereign after many billions of years, meaning he has the freedom to be really creative in his ministry to us. So the creativity of this is mind-boggling because he is free to you know, transmit his words to people. He's free to come show up as an apparition for Doreen Virtue. He is free to do this massive angelic, you know, pressure on the planet. He's free to do these experiments because he's a master of masters, and we. You know, we celebrate that today, you know, in this conversation. So I wonder if you have any things you want to say in closing for us about your perceptions, your relationships particularly with the nativity of Christ.
That this is a very wonderful, opportune moment to open your heart and kind of get out of what you think you know about Jesus to ask the question, I need you to show me who you really are, and to open up the heart, because we do need an intellectual construct or a belief system to help our emotions be expressed. But the problem with a lot of the existing baggage that we're carrying of unworthiness that is a byproduct of the planetary rebellion and cutting us away from, like separating us from our faith relationship with God, that Jesus is the way shower. and he knew the path to the Father, and he is the path. He is the path. When he said that, and Christians still say that, they are right. He is the path to the primal creator of all there is. And I just encourage people to go beyond who you think Jesus is and say, hey, I've heard this about you. I've heard that about you. Who are you really? Show me. I need to know. And he will show up. He will show up exactly where an individual is, and show that in a way that will make sense, not only to the head or the intellect, but to the heart and the emotions. And when he does that, and that emotional experience is perceived along with the new insights, he's gotcha. He's gotcha, and he's not going to let you go, and he's going to turn your life around, because he is the Redeemer. And I know that these are kind of like Christian terms that even some Urantia Book readers shy away from, but he redeems your self-concept. He makes you feel worthy of being a lovable child of God. And when that happens, it's a life-changing game changer. You are a different person, and your sense of worthfulness expands so that you can do the things that you have been designed to do as a personality, as a child of God. So I just encourage people to open up to that now, and to go beyond what you think you know about Jesus, and really ask the question, show me who you are. I need to know.
So Donna, before we go, I almost forgot. I wanted to invite Alec, who is listening in with us, and our intrepid technical director. Alec, did you have any comments or anything you wanted to say to us or to Donna?
Yeah, absolutely. I can say that I really relate a lot to the experiences that you shared today. And I took a couple of notes as you were talking to remind myself of what I wanted to say to you. I think that in reading the Urantia book and understanding, it's given me a very good perspective on that we are evolving as humans, and how that we have changed over time very greatly, and that we are still changing. We're in the midst of change, ongoing. And I think right now, one of the things that we need to change is not being so self-centered in our understanding of, for example, I'm a Christian, so this is how the world expects me to be. And what I mean is, when you were talking about being in the church and, having them see who you really were, and then, pushing you out, but at the same time, they're saying, we need to open our minds up and things like that. I saw that growing up. My mother is Pentecostal Christian. I saw a lot of that, and that's sort of what turned me off to Christianity, but it never turned me off in, exploring spirituality. And so I wanted to give an example. My daughter, I took her to church. We don't go to church very often, but, I talk with my daughter a lot. When my teenage daughter lets me talk to her about these things. And we went to church once, and the preacher was, invited people up to the front to pray for them and things. And I saw my daughter started to tear up. And next thing I know, she's really, really crying. And I could see she was overcome with emotion and joy. And so I agree, that there's something there, there's something to it. And I think, this is one of the things that Byron talks about in his book, and it's in the Urantia book, about this is the way I understand it, the three levels of, sort of being a human. And one of them is spirituality, and we express spirituality through religion. And, I think people do need to be more connected to religion, but unfortunately right now we are so self-centered and believe that, you can choose any topic that someone believes they stand for and speak against it, and they get easily offended. That's what I'm trying to say here. And that, I think eventually we'll evolve out of that, I hope. And that, we can speak easily against the things that one person might believe, but not that person not become offended by it and turn off from it, which is what your experience was about. The other one was that you mentioned about, you're being happy when your parents passed. yeah, I think this is something I also identified with because after reading the Urantia book and doing a lot of, exploring, soul exploration, I guess you'd call it, I also feel now happy about death, that it's, I don't think it's a sad thing. And one thing that I've learned about from the Urantia book is that this life is just the tip of the iceberg of a much greater thing that's going to happen to all of us when we move on. And, it's okay. There's so much more to look forward to, so I agree with you. And thank you for sharing your experiences with us.
Oh, you're so welcome. I've got a ton more.
I'd love to hear it.
I want to invite everybody to partake of Donna's work by going to her website, which Donna, it's an unusual URL, but if they Google Center of Christ Consciousness, it'll come up pretty high up, right?
Well, if there's two URLs, one is the original one, and then when I realized it was a little hard to spell out to people, I changed one to just centerforchristconsciousness.org.
Oh,
you have to know how to spell consciousness, that's all.
Okay.
You have to know how to spell that big word.
Conscious.org.
Centerforchristconsciousness.org. And I just want to say that I've written extensively about the nature of the spiritual growth under the Living Christ Consciousness heading on the homepage. So there's a ton of writings that I've shared with people over the years of the things that I've experienced. And that's a really good link if you want to know more about the spiritual journey. And it's kind of like in a Urantia context.
Well, also, folks, I want to invite you to do sessions with Donna. I do them all the time. They're very unique, and nobody, I can't tell how many people sing praises for these sessions that she does, where she brings in the presence of our divine parents and other beings, so for your healing and for your upliftment. So, Alec, if you haven't done one, I invite you to do that with Donna. But also Donna's books, again, the Teach Us to Love, and the more recent book, Divine Mother, Divine Father. You can find that them on Amazon, etc. So again, thank you, Donna, for being with us and bringing joy. There you are with in Florida with almost like a tank top shirt on and this Christmas tree behind you. It's an odd image, but I've really enjoyed being today and feeling your joy and
thank you, Byron.
Taught by you. Thank you so much, Donna.
Thank you, dear. Okay, lots of love to you and Merry Christmas, everyone.
Happy Christmas all. Thank you so much.